are almost there. I think we're live. Hi, everyone. Just double checking to make sure we're good, and looks like we are live. So hi, everyone. I'm Allison. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the executive director of the Gallatin County Democrats. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 5:30, I have the honor and privilege of speaking with at least one of our representatives who are serving right now in the legislature. And tonight, I am joined by Representative Jim Hamilton from House District 61. Thank you for being here.
Glad to join you, Allison.
Always a pleasure. I have to say, I have to give you props and kudos really quickly, because you have actually been the really the one who initiated these updates during the session. We did some things between the election and the start of the session, and then we've been doing these every week, and you help bring each legislator to the Tuesday or Thursday. And I just want to say thank you for coordinating and all of your efforts on that. I really appreciate it.
Well, that's kind of you to say, but the whole team is what pulls it off. So I'm glad to be part of the team.
Yeah, well, we have a phenomenal team here in Gallatin. I just have to say props to all of you. So what's been going on? It's day 22.
Oh, nothing. I just sit here out in front of the Capitol at night and kind of just shoot the breeze, have a glass of wine. Nothing's really going on.
Yeah, that's how my life has been these days too.
There was that small thing, unfortunately, of HB 102, the gun bill passing the Senate floor today, or at least I guess that was on second reading. Yeah. So that one slipped by. On the House floor today, we dealt with sanctuary cities. Even though we don't have a sanctuary city in Montana, there's no need for the law. We spent a fair amount of time and got into quite a bit of a tussle about whether having or not having a sanctuary city has anything to do with racism, and it was ugly. So that's what's happened today anyway. There's a bunch of other things that have happened today too that weren't in any place where I was. I'm on the Appropriations Committee, and so we only see bills that have a financial impact on the general fund of over about $100,000. So I don't get as good a view in committee as some of my colleagues who've been on the show here with you. But I do see a lot of things that come across the floor, of course. And let me just give you a quick rundown of the things that are coming soon, or maybe really already here. Yeah. In Judiciary today, 3 bills that I can think of that really stuck out. Maybe a fourth one even. One was our good friend Derek Skis. He says with tongue in cheek, a constitutional amendment to limit tax types to just 2. That would come to the voters, and the voters would have to vote on it. 2/3 of the legislature has to vote on it. So probably unlikely that'll go anywhere, but it's just the type of thing we're seeing. Jedediah Hinkle had 2 bills, HB 257 and 258 today in Judiciary. And they haven't voted on these yet because they hear them one day and then usually a few days later they'll have executive action on them. One was to prohibit local governments from getting in the way of businesses being open at all times, basically aimed at the pandemic and the way regulation was put in place and where they shut businesses down. There's a whole package of these taking power from local government to do anything, particularly the health officials. His second one was just the opposite, which was to prohibit the enforcement of federal laws related to guns, firearms, ammunition, magazines, to prohibit the enforcement at the local level by government. So I would mention something here as kind of an interesting thing. We've always thought that the Republicans, for the last several sessions anyway, were, let's have local control. We don't think the federal government should control anything. We think we should control it. And the further we push it down to the locals, the better. And that has stopped. There is no interest in involving the locals anymore. And in fact, somebody stood up on the floor today and said, Well, I've got to speak on one more reason why not to let local government be in charge. It's a totally stunning change that the Republicans would now be thinking this way.
Do you have any insight into why this change?
You know, I don't. It's only become apparent in the last several days. I'll have to talk to my colleagues and see if we can come up with something. But it's I think it's related a little bit to the pandemic and local health officials, and they suddenly realized that all of this local stuff, and we kept using the argument on local option tax and so forth, that it, you know, pushing it all down to the local level wasn't in their best interest because they couldn't control things.
Right.
We did. It used to be sporadic, and we used to laugh about it in the last couple of sessions that they always wanted local control until they didn't. And predicting when they didn't was the difficult part. But now it pretty much seems to be everything.
All the
No
time.
local control on anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's another example. Came out of local government today, or not, didn't come out, but was heard in local government, House Bill 259. Sue Vinton, affordable housing obstacles is what I would call it. She was saying you can't apply a fee nor any kind of set aside as property for a specific class of resident based on income. So clearly aimed at hamstringing affordable housing. Fitzpatrick over in the Senate, Senate Bill 67, only local health officials can ask for a sheriff's help. No state local official or state health official can. And if their sheriff refuses to cooperate and help, no penalty. They've eliminated the penalty for it. So, you know, like really, why? Who's going to do that? Keith Regier, now this is sort of inside baseball, but interim committees between sessions for years have been equally divided. And Keith Regier over in the Senate, that's Senate Bill 122, was just heard yesterday, wants to change that so that there's three people who are, so we divide them equally between House and Senate. And he wants the majority party to have three representatives on the committee, three members on the committee, and the minority party to have one. So the mixture up here is between 62 and 67% Republican, and he wants to take it to 75% Republican in the interim committees. I'm not sure that one will go anywhere. What else was left? Oh, you know, I'm being negative here. I'm giving you all these bad ideas and bad bills, but Mike Hopkins out of Missoula, HB 191, should show up in front of taxation, but it's been canceled twice. And so there's some gaming going on here to provide property tax relief to those particularly below about $35,000 worth of income. Okay. A little bit of relief above that up to about 50,000, but not as much, kind of a sliding scale. So I think that's a good idea. It's a top concern that constituents have is how do we pay our property taxes? Mm-hmm. So I think that's good, but the fact that it's been canceled twice tells me they're trying to put it with something else that probably won't be particularly good. Sure. Sorry to be a pessimist there.
We all are right now.
I'd mentioned this, as I mentioned, I'm on appropriations. Section F deals with infrastructure. What happens in Section F doesn't go into HB2, which is the major appropriations bill. It has its own set of bills. HB, what is it now? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, so forth. So they're all separate, but they all have to do with infrastructure. Well, tomorrow we'll be hearing testimony on one of the bills that has the MSU buildings in it. So there'll be 6 or 7 buildings that are proposed to be repaired. Today we heard Habitat Montana as part of the Fish, Wildlife, and Park bills. That was sort of tied to revenues from the marijuana initiative. But in the governor's budget, they've basically stripped away all of the marijuana initiative money and move that over to other programs. I did ask about how much that would have added to Habitat Montana today and got a little tense around that issue. So last thing I would mention in terms of giving people a feel for what's going on here in the near term is that tomorrow we have 12 bills on the floor. Only 2 of them had a 10% dissent, I would say. It's an easy way to say that. So if we had 20 people in the committee, all but 2 of the bills passed 18-2 or better. And so you can see we're still getting a bunch of bills that are not that consequential, but the floodgates are opening, and these, like HB 102 and the Sanctuary Cities bill, are moving, and these other ones I mentioned will soon be on the floor. You'll see a real change in sort of the tenor of what's the kumbaya days are over.
Which is really surprising because it hasn't felt very kumbaya from the start. So I won't lie, I'm a little nervous about that prediction, Representative Hamilton.
Well, yes, it's going to get uglier. Last week was obviously a very ugly week for those of us with a little bit more progressive views. The abortion bills and the trans bills were a very bad day, pushed all into one day. But, when you think about it from a day-by-day perspective, still a shrinking, but a vast number of bills came out of committee unanimously.
Sure. Okay. So with some of these, we did get a couple questions in advance, so I want to ask you those.
Okay.
And one of them you kind of alluded to in one of the bills that you were talking about just a minute ago about local control. And one of the things that I know the city of Bozeman has been pushing for is the local option sales tax. And that question did come up earlier today. What are the pros and cons of a local option sales tax? We know that most sales tax are pretty regressive. How do we justify that? Is there, now that we have a more friendly federal administration, could we consider maybe utilizing programs like that instead? And I just, what are your thoughts on these, this sales tax discussion?
Let me start with the last part about the federal first. And although it is a friendlier federal administration to those of us with Democratic leanings, that's not going to provide a pipeline of more money. And as you can tell by even the bills that are being considered for stimulus or CARES 3, if you will, it still doesn't include any money for lost revenue to states or local governments. And so they've still got the same problem they had under the previous administration, is that it's very difficult for cities and towns to pay for the infrastructure needed, and Bozeman is the poster child for that. We have a huge number of tourists coming through. We have a vast amount of infrastructure projects that we need to get done, and we just don't have a way to do it without raising more property taxes on people. And there is a limit on how fast property taxes can grow. So I guess I would answer the question in 2 ways. One is, I am not in favor of a general sales tax across the state. And the reason why is we have no control over it. And it's to make a general sales tax work, the Republicans are going to want to replace something else. And to replace something else, you have to make the general sales tax on everything, or almost everything. And that becomes extraordinarily regressive. If you have a local option tax, what you get, all of the local option tax bills, you have to go in front of the voters in your community. And part of the process of going to those voters is ahead of time, you sit down and if you do it well, you sit down in your community and say, okay, what do we want this to cover? What's the money going to go for? How are we going to stop it from being as regressive as a general sales tax? And you have all of that conversation before you actually put it on the ballot. What we're finding is in local option taxes in other communities, The initial time, there's a lot of reservation. People will, usually in vote numbers will pass in the middle 50s. Whitefish, the last time they did their local option tax to renew it and to increase the amount of it, it passed 84 to 16%. So we think of people don't like these taxes, but it usually doesn't look that way after you get into it a little further. It's still going to be a somewhat regressive tax. We can control that on a local option tax to some degree at the community level. We can control that if we have the option to distribute the money in the way our community best wants to distribute it. The problem at this point is we got one resort tax bill out of committee 10 to 8 and it died immediately on the floor, 67 to 33. So the other one that has come across so far died in committee, didn't even get out of committee. And I think any other local option tax bill will die in committee. And interestingly enough, it's not so much the Democrats that kill the bills, it's the Republicans.
Sure.
And the Republicans kill it because they say it's a tax. And if it's a tax, we don't want to vote for it, they say. The problem is that it's not a tax. They're voting for giving the local community the opportunity to have the discussion, decide what they want to do.
Right.
But
right.
That's the history of it. It's been going on that way forever. I don't see us making any more progress this session for those who might want one. I would close this part of the discussion with saying, you know what, for a Bozeman or a Missoula that are growing rapidly, and we need money for new water systems, for intersections, for keeping up our roads, the question becomes, how else do you pay for it?
Right.
And we could, I hear a lot of people say, well, those people in Helena will understand what we need, and they'll, if we could just communicate it better. Not so. It's not happening.
Yeah. I always like to think about taxes as investments. This is community investment, and the idea of a community being able to decide how they want to raise money and then invest that money. I will always be willing to have that conversation. So thank you.
I think there's one other important part about these, and the community gets to decide this. Some of the local option bills that come through, they're a little bit too tight for my liking and don't give as much power to the community. To really make it work, we need to give power to the community. But these are aimed at luxury items. This is not groceries and milk and diapers and shirts and shoes and stuff of that nature. So it's not going to happen now, but I think we still need to have the discussion at the local level of how do we pay for what Bozeman needs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. So it doesn't seem like there are many other questions that are popping up that I'm seeing yet. So if you've asked a question, I just may not see it yet. But are there any bills that you're excited about that you do think will be moving forward here in the next week or two?
Good question. As I said, I've got a somewhat limited view because I only see the ones with money. Today we did deal with one that there's two actually that we dealt with in appropriations today that I like. One is fairly automatic, but there's always a little bit of breath being held on it, and that is inflation factor added to school funding. So we'll end up with, over the next 2 years, a little bit over a 4% increase in school funding due to the inflation factors. And that one has not cleared committee yet, but I think it's pretty safe to assume it will be.
Okay.
The other one that is kind of an interesting program is putting some money into school districts that raise their salaries on starting teachers. So we have really a problem statewide of for the upper end of the teacher scale, or even the middle end of the scale, we do pretty well compared to our neighbors. But on the starting end of the scale, we don't do well at all. And there's a bill, I think that was HB 143, that is aimed at getting some money to school districts who agree to work with their bargaining units and get a higher starting salary for new teachers.
Awesome. And that was voted on in the full house already, wasn't it? Or
yes, when that's on second reading.
Second
reading. It was voted on on the floor and passed with flying colors. But then it gets re-referred back down to appropriations to our committee because it has a money request, and a rather sizable money request. And so then the appropriations committee is supposed to look at that bill from the perspective of the money only, not the policy. Well, in a bill like that, it's only about money, so that's easy enough to do, but that's not always the case.
Right. So then if it passes out of appropriations, it'll go back to the House floor for third reading?
You've got it.
Okay. Okay. See, I'm getting there. I'm learning. I'm figuring.
And same process happens over in the Senate then. If it passes third, it gets sent over to the Senate. It'll go to probably the Education Committee, up to the floor, back to or Finance and Claims, as they call it, and so forth.
Okay. Okay. So it still has a long journey ahead, but probably good. What is the bill number for the inflation factor?
I think that was HB 15.
HB 15. Okay. Thank you. Someone asked that. Thank you for asking that.
And that's a pretty common bill number. That inflation factor is usually one of those first 15 or 16 bills.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Any other bills? Anything else? Any other updates from you?
I think I would stop there. I think that there is, as I said, the floodgates are going to open here shortly. And so our problem may be doing this twice a week. We may be stacking up on other bills. I actually do, I come to think of it, I did write down some other things that I wanted to talk about. Senate Bill 65 passed third reading today. That's the one that gives businesses liability protection. Terrible bill. In an odd thing that I did, I voted against it on second, or excuse me, voted for it on second and against it on third. And that's a longer story for some other day, but I'll own up to that. State of State address was last Thursday after the meeting, and basically you probably read about it in the news and whatever. All he really did was repeat what he had talked about in his campaign promises, with the one exception is that the governor said he would sign 2 of the abortion bills, or anti-abortion bills. And so that's coming. We don't know which of the 2, but I think there's only been 4 of them. Mm-hmm. One of the 4 is a referendum, and so he can't and doesn't get a chance to sign that one. Okay. So that just goes straight to the voters, assuming it passes the House or the Senate. But that means the other 2 he would probably sign. And those are the other things I wanted to mention. Sanctuaries. One that people will be interested in, but it's not momentous, is fireworks.
Fireworks.
Fireworks. It seems appropriate for the legislature, doesn't it?
Why not?
Fireworks is HB 215. We heard it today, and basically it legalizes pop bottle rockets and one other kind of firework, which a lot of cities ban. So it probably only means anything for the counties, but I know that fire folks were less enthusiastic about it because it causes a lot of fires.
Yeah, I bet a lot of pet owners are also less than enthusiastic about it as well.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I live in the county in Gallatin, and I can tell you that it is not fun around 4th of July, and New Year's this year actually was not fun either.
Same. I live in the county, and the poor dogs. I feel bad for the dogs, but
yep. Yeah.
That's not necessarily a momentous one, but it certainly is irritating around 4th of July and New Year's.
Yeah, definitely. And, especially with the fire danger and 4th of July, that's not good. Well, thank you for those. I do want to mention to everyone who's watching, if you haven't heard, HB 176 has come back.
Yes.
Yeah, HB 176 is a voter suppression bill. It removes same-day voter registration in Montana. And if that had been had that been in the books in 2020, more than 3,300 Montanans would not have been able to vote in 2020. That's not an insignificant number when we're talking about Montana. And so it had originally been tabled in committee. Some Republican legislators in the state administration committee changed their mind, apparently, or had it changed for them. And they voted on it again in committee. It passed 10-9, and it will go to the House floor for a vote. So please contact your Republican legislators about this bill. I'll list our Republican legislators in Gallatin, but this is where we need to contact directly, not just a committee, but an actual legislator about HB 176.
Glad you mentioned that, Allison. It was one I'd forgotten to put on my list, but it passed this afternoon, I think it was. And that whole process of tabling is confusing to people. I noticed one of my colleagues was even confused about it earlier this week. But a bill is tabled, it's only temporarily dead. Because you can always find, or it's always possible to find other legislators who might band with you and ask for it to be taken back off the table. So up here we say a bill's not actually dead until we get past transmittal, and then it's dead.
Okay. That's good to know. I feel like there's been a couple bills that just seem to not be able to die right now. That, like, you think we've had a victory, and nope, here it comes again. So we'll just keep
the zombie bills, we call them.
The zombie bills. That's a good way to put it. A zombie bill. We need
and
some.
In fact, some of what we're seeing in the floodgates opening up are zombie bills from previous sessions.
Right. Because why not? Well, anyway, thank you, Representative Hamilton, for your time this evening. Really appreciate your insight. And just spending time with us and updating us. And you're probably right that twice a week isn't going to be enough to keep on top of all of these things, but we'll keep trying and doing our best. And thank you to everyone who's engaging in the session this year. It's fast and furious, and it's only going to get worse. So hang on to your hats and keep being engaged. So
thanks, Allison.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night, everyone.